What is going on, guys, audience, tribe? Today is going to be a Q&A because what sparked this, after several months, I got back on YouTube not to watch videos. No, thank you. I got on there to check because the server I use to host podcasts, that platform, they ripped the audio and put it on YouTube. So although I don't encourage you to watch YouTube or any other mainstream media, and I would consider YouTube mainstream, I do get comments on there. Maybe some people don't know what podcasts are. I just tend to think everybody knows what podcasts are because I'm a podcaster, but a lot of people don't. So maybe they get exposed on YouTube. If you do, go somewhere else. But for those people that are just on YouTube or don't know about podcasts or whatever, I got some questions on them. I tried to reply on there if it was something I thought was decent enough to reply to. And then I opened it up for the patrons and asked them for questions. And I got a bunch, and that was just today. So I don't know if I'm going to get to YouTube questions today. I may if there's time. And if not, tough. I'm going to answer the patrons' questions first. So it's going to be a general Q&A on all kinds of topics today. With that, welcome to the podcast, where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, the right way, with God at the center, biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Okay, with that, let's get into the topic du jour, right? The questions for today, starting with Patreon, and there are so many questions. So let's go to that. Okay. What steel do you like for an E.D.C knife and why? Man, we could get into steel snobbery if you wanted me to list like good, better, best. But just a good, decent steel, man. Don't overthink this. And what environment do you live in? Do you live in Nevada? Because corrosion resistance is probably not a big deal for you. Do you live in Puerto Rico? That's probably a pretty big deal. Or Alaska, right? Corrosion resistance is probably a big deal. But yeah, super steels are a thing, and they are super. So do I like Magna Cut? Yeah, I like Magna Cut. Do I like something like an old school super steel like an S.R.T? Yeah, they're fantastic. Do I have any problem carrying a D2 blade, which is not a super steel? It's a decent steel. No, I don't. And keep in mind that heat treating is often more important than steel. So something like a Buck, which Buck does a really good job on their heat treat in general, something like a Buck with a 440, pretty generic blade, is really good. Now, you should put some thought into this. Maybe don't E.D.C a gas station knife or some made in China, garbage steel. But yeah, a decent steel. But don't overthink it. Look for steel that has properties that you like. And D2 is fine. It's a budget steel. It's a fine steel. A good heat treat 440 is good. If you're not worried about corrosion, a good 1095, which has been around a long time, is fine. What hunting scope zero distance? 50, 100, 200, why? 50. 50, I zero pretty much everything at 50. Why? Because 50 gives me a pretty good point-blank range. You could probably finagle it and adjust the yardage a little bit and get a slightly better max point-blank range. But I hunt with different things, right? Am I going for Coyote today or am I going for elk? I've got different rifles. And the fact that I have them all zeroed for 50 yards tells me there are 0 for 50 yards. If I go out to check and confirm my zero, I don't have to remember, was this 0 for 36 yards or 150 yards? It's 50 yards. Just zero it for 50 yards. Unless you're using something so old and antiquated like a 4570 or something, you may want to adjust that. But for a general modern cartridge, 50 yards. And that's going to give you, for most modern cartridges, whether it's a 223 or a 308 or 6.5 Creedmoor, it's going to give you a pretty decent max point-blank range. It's about 250 yards or greater, right? It's fine. And most of the things I take are inside of that. So that's 50 yards. You could say, well, why not zero for the longer distance of your max point-blank range? And that would be fine too, but then you always have to get a range that long, which meaning every time I drop and fall, and which happens quite often when I'm out in the bush, and knock my scope or my rifle around, which happens quite often in the bush, then I have to find a 250-yard range to reconfirm zero. If I know it's 0 to 50, I just need a 50-yard range, which is a lot easier and less logistical challenge to do. Even out west where I can shoot pretty much as far as I want, it's still easier to do it at 50. So 50 yards is what I zero my guns at almost always, the vast majority of the time. Thoughts on a pump 22? I know you aren't a big fan of Henry, but the 22 pump looks cool and fun. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, if you want a cool fun gun, I don't care if it even really works half the time. Henry's probably fine for that. Also, if you just want a cheap, fun pump gun, Rossi makes one. Yeah, pump 22s have been around a long time. I imagine those Henrys and other ones are likely copies of older designs. Pump 22s are super fun. I don't know why you would get one over just a Ruger 1022, but if you just want a pump 22, yeah, cool and fun. That checks those boxes. Not every gun has to be a hardcore survival gun. And for like a first gun for a kid, yeah, that would be a fine gun, a pump gun. Especially if you do a lot of other pump gun stuff like a pump shotgun. So yeah, pump 22, cool, fun, check. I like it. Let's see more. Oh, there's a whole bunch of questions here. Keep mags loaded or not? Yes or no? Is it a mag you're going to use? Then keep it loaded. The whole spring thing is I don't know, maybe steel was garbage, 100 years ago, but you keeping a mag stored loaded is not going to mess it up. You keeping a mag empty is not going to mess it up. What generally wears out of springs is use over time. So yeah, if you're doing training classes or you're a firearms instructor where you're shooting, tens of thousands of rounds a year, you're going to wear out those magazines. You're going to have to replace them. But if you load up a good quality like P mag or Glock mag and keep it in a bag for 10 years, it's probably still going to be fine. You're not going to ruin the spring, so it doesn't matter. If it's a mag you're going to use, like if it's in a bailout bag, obviously it should be loaded. If it's just in a closet, it's an extra mag, that's up to you. Keep it unloaded, it doesn't really matter. The whole springs taking a set thing, I think maybe that was always a myth, or maybe it was a thing, in World War I. I don't think it's a thing today. With good modern steels and spring steel, I would not be concerned about it. Mags break for all kinds of reasons. Springs get weak, in which case if you don't have another mag, you just open it up and pull the spring a little bit, and usually it's good. Or the feed lips get bent, or feed lips snap. All kinds of reasons mags go bad. Feed geometry gets off, but mags are a disposable part. I wouldn't overthink it. Thoughts on various domestic geopolitical situations the U.S. is involved in and how they can affect us and how to prepare. Man, that's pretty much, that's its own podcast, right? And I'm not the political guy. Some things transcend politics. Probably the worst crimes in our nation's history that have been exposed, the Epstein files, is horrible. I don't know why we care about other stupid stuff so much, like the Olympics or other garbage stuff. When little kids are getting kidnapped and murdered and sexually abused. So a lot of that other crap doesn't matter. What does it matter if, when we were on the Cold War against Russia or now with Iran, or you should just be prepared, period. Because I don't see the future and you don't see the future. If there's an imminent threat, maybe put a little bit more time in that, but does it really matter if nukes drop or the economy crashes? It pretty much all results in the same thing. This is not doomsday preppers. I'm preparing for bird flu. I don't know I don't even know the N1, H1, B1 virus that's going to wipe out the planet in a year. Like, that's not me. I don't see the future. I don't pretend to see the future. I don't know but what I do know is civilizations collapse for a variety of reasons. A lot of times it's death by 1,000 cuts. And I don't know when that's going to be. And I don't know how that's going to look. So just be prepared for a broad spectrum of situations. Yeah, it's a good question, but it's way too much for this Q&A. What's a good way to help convince normie friends and family to think of getting more prepared for emergency and tough times? Maybe a without rule of law scenario can lead to worse to water. How we convince them okay, so I'm going to summarize this here. How can you convince your normie friends to get prepared? Probably not by using the phrase without rule of law. Probably leave that out. Probably start with the mundane if they're normies. probably start out with something that's actually likely to happen to them in their lifetime or they've had happen before. Like, hey, have you ever lost your job? Oh, you got family now? Wouldn't it be nice if you had some stuff stored up, you had some silver, you had a savings account? People don't talk about that. Like, you got to have 5,000 rounds of 5.56. Cool. Do you have a savings account? Right. I recently did taxes with my wife. We had to render under Caesar. $10,000, almost $10,000 we owed in taxes this year. Does it really matter if I have 10,000 rounds? I guess I could sell it, but you get what I'm saying. Have a savings account. That's a good practical prep. Like, start there. If you don't have a savings account, right, and something happens and you need new tires for your car, or whatever the case is, right, things that are way more mundane, that's a lot more of a thing. Or say, hey, do you remember when COVID hit and the shelves were bare? And yeah, that time nobody really went hungry and starved, but what if you just, for whatever reason, couldn't go to the store for the while? The roads were shut down. There was another mass run on goods because of the next COVID scamdemic or whatever. For whatever reason, right? There's just not food at the store, or you can't get to the store. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to feed you and your family for a bit? Right? What do you normally eat, bro? Do you eat ramen? Put up a couple of cases of ramen. What are they, $5-10? I don't know, with COVID inflation, maybe a little bit more. Put up a couple of cases of ramen. If your kids are hungry and whining, they can have ramen. You know, you don't have to watch your kids go hungry. Or, you know, start with practical stuff. What do they like? Beef stew? Well, store up a couple of extra cans of Denti Moore beef stew. Maybe start there for your normie friends. Don't start with, when there's without rule of law, man, you got to have your battle rifle zeroed and you got to have a LPVO on it with PMags, and maybe not there. Maybe like, hey, you know, maybe have some money in your savings account. Maybe have a couple of cases of ramen noodles if you're trying to actually get people into it. Some other things come to mind, and this is something I got from Jack Spirico, the Survival Podcast. He's been saying this for years. I've been listening to him for years. But make a blackout kit for your buddy. You know, basic stuff. Just put it in a little bag. Nothing that looks tactical, just a little duffel bag or something. A couple of candles, a couple of flashlights, maybe one of those cheap cell phone battery packs. Nothing tactical. Not an AR-7 survival rifle, right? Just basic blackout kit for when the power goes out. And just give it to them. Like, put this in your closet, put this in your pantry, and just let it go. And then probably sometime in the next few years, if you're playing the long game, the power will go out. And hopefully he remembers that kit. And he'll use it. And he'll probably think about that. Right, that's a lot softer sell than telling your buddy the Illuminati's coming for his kids and he better get an M4 and a chest rig. You said normie. For the average normie person, it's a lot easier to swallow. Oh, I've got a lights out blackout kit. Also, I don't know if he's a family man or a young single man, but maybe something that you and the family can do, or both families can do, that's prepping in disguise. My wife likes making jam and jelly. She likes going out and foraging. Making jam and jelly. Maybe have them over for that. Don't even mention prepping or survival. Make a bunch of jam with them. Kids will like it. You'll like it. The wives hopefully will like it. And just give them all the jam. If it's just a single dude, maybe next time you slay a beast, ask him for some help making beef jerky, even if you don't need his help. A little kid, baby steps, right? You ask him for help changing a tire, even if you don't need their help. I remember when I was little, my dad would have me stand on a board when he was cutting stuff. Really need me to stand on the board? Probably not, but it made me feel important. Even if I was literally dead weight on that. I was doing something. Have him over. Make beef jerky. Again, don't mention the end of the world as we know it, man. Bring up Red Dawn. Just make jerky. Eat jerky. Slice up some meat. A couple of guys doing dude stuff. So that's probably how I would go with that approach. Optimal barrel length for .22, pistol caliber carbines, and ammo. So two different things. Optimal length for .22 is generally around 16 inches. .22 has such little power and little powder capacity, you actually will generally start losing velocity depending on the load, somewhere between 16 and 18 inches. So you're not getting more velocity, and why carry the extra weight? The only caveat to that is if you're trying to shoot quiet without a suppressor, you want a really long barrel, like a 24-inch barrel and a 22. But for optimal velocity and just practicality, around 16 inches, 16 inches, 18 inches, but around 16 inches for a 22 is optimal velocity. For a PCC, this really depends on a lot, right? The caliber, everything's a trade-off. The longer barrel you're going to get in a PCC, generally the more velocity out to a point. If it's a pistol caliber carbine, obviously you're either going to have to go the braced route or the actual PCC route with a stock. If it's a stock, it's got to have a 16-inch barrel, so it's a moot point. You don't want anything longer than that. With traditional handgun rounds, if you're talking about like a Magnum, like a 357 Magnum or a 44 Magnum, you could argue maybe you want an 18 or 20-inch barrel, but in general, 16 inches is what you're stuck with. If you're talking about a brace, it's a trade-off. You start getting shorter, you start lowering velocity, right? So it's a trade-off there. You just got to pick what you want. There's no right or wrong there. It's just if you're using a braced pistol as a PCC, do you want more velocity or do you want more maneuverability? And pick which side of that you want and pick which length you want. There's always a trade-off, like many things in firearms there. So pick what you want. But yeah, for the 22, that one's pretty easy. And for an actual stock, then you're probably stuck with 16 inches. And even today with the no tax stamp, if it's for something you're going to travel with, as far as I know, and from what I know about the gun laws, if it's a class 3 item, even if you don't have to pay the tax stamp, you still have to do the paperwork, and you're still supposed to notify ATF every time you cross state lines, which makes it impractical still for me. But those are some thoughts on that. Why is there no solid copper 22 long rifle monolithic bullets? I don't know if you obviously just don't know, but, and not an insult, people come at this from all different kinds. Maybe you just go to your local, gas station or Tractor Supply to look for 22 ammo, but there's a ton of solid copper 22 long rifle ammo. CCI makes some, Norma makes some, there's probably more, but I generally tend towards CCI, not because I'm sponsored by them or anything, just because it's generally available, but there is plenty of solid copper 22 long rifle. I guess an actual question would be, why is it not more common? Because it's expensive, and let's be real, most people shoot 22 because it's affordable. Copper costs a lot more than lead. Ergo, solid copper ammo is a lot more than lead ammo in general. So you're going to spend a lot more to shoot it. It'd be great if premium ammo costs the same as budget ammo, but it doesn't. So there's that. And, there's plenty of it, a lot, because poor saps that are stuck behind the Iron Curtain in California, they can't actually shoot, rodents with regular 22. So you got stuff running around there with the Black Plague because they're more worried about a condor might eat a 22 bullet, whatever. If you still live in California, that's your fault. I have a hard time feeling sorry for you. I lived in California once, and I left. I got out of her because it was a horrible situation just to live there, even though I had a good job there. So you do what you want, but there are solid copper 22s. There are a lot of them. They are a thing. They're going to cost more because copper costs more than lead. Okay, let's move on. What upper should I get from my Ar-15? I already have a 5.56, 6.5 Grendel 300 Blackout, 350 Legend. Maybe have a backup for survival. I don't know. And I said, okay, for survival, if you don't have a second one, probably get another 16-inch 5.56 and a nice one if it's going to be for survival, right? A general purpose, but a good chrome lined barrel or nitride, a good chrome bolt carrier group, not a budget one, but a really good one if it's for survival. Then, let's see here. That was kind of that. Let's see, comments. Okay, this one maybe could be its own episode because he replied and I replied again. This is Patreon. I don't check this every couple of months. I check it all the time. So he says, I have a 20-inch AR 5.56, 16-inch, and a 7.5-inch. I was thinking of maybe a hunting upper to put in a survival bag to accompany my main AR. And here's some thoughts that I had for him. And this is the kind of the treatment that patrons get, right? If you want I just get the best hunting load for your go-to upper and run with that. Say a solid copper TSX for 5.56 or, a 62 grain bonded bullet, whatever shoots point of aim, point of impact, and is a good solid hunting load. That's or a 77 grain right for hunting deer. And he lives in a place where that's the biggest thing he's probably going to hunt. And I was just thinking about how much weight that is, right? He's talking about for a survival bag, so you're going to carry all the stuff you need to survive in your survival bag, plus your AR, plus your ammo, plus your mags, plus another upper, plus another bolt carrier group if it's a weird round, plus another optic, right? That's a lot of weight. That's how much, if you subtracted all that weight for the upper and the bolt carrier group and the optic and all that stuff, how much extra ammo for your primary gun could you carry? A lot. How much extra survival gear could you carry? A lot, right? So this probably doesn't make... Here's where I'm going to add to this. Here's where it might make sense, right? If you're like, I'm going to bug out to Uncle Bob's cabin, he lives outside of Mordor, outside of east of the Mississippi. He lives somewhere where there's actually a decent chance of survival. And I'm going to keep at Uncle Bob's cabin an AR with an extra upper. And weight is not an issue because it's already there. You don't have to carry it there. If your car breaks down when you're bugging out and you got to bug out on foot because of gridlock traffic or whatever, it's not an issue because it's already where you need to go. It's already at your bug out location. Then you might want to look at one of these weird things or an esoteric caliber. You're just going to stock, 10,000 rounds of 6.5 Grendel at the cabin. That's fine. But for a survival bag, which is what you initially posted, I just get more ammo for what you're actually going to need and carry. For the weight of that, here's another comment that I made. For the weight of that extra upper and the extra bolt carrier group and the extra optic for two different calibers, here's the thing. You probably just go with a 308 at that point. Now, 308's heavier. A lot of times you're not going to want it in a survival situation. Sometimes you will. But if you're talking about two different calibers, two different uppers, two different optics, right, at that point, and you're going to carry it in a bag, at that point, you're probably just better off with 308. It's probably going to weigh about the same or less than all the other stuff. If you're adding all that in. So that's a case where you might just go with an AR-10 or what's the Ruger one, the SFAR that they just discontinued, sadly, or a SCAR-17, SCAR Heavy, something like that. Because a SCAR-17 is going to weigh less almost certainly than an AR with two uppers. It weighs like 7.7 pounds. So, and it's 308, and you only have to stock the one caliber, and it's a better caliber than any of those other calibers. So that's a thing where you may want to look at 308. He also goes on to say he lives in Ohio, which my condolences. He's talking about a straight wall cartridge. Here's the thing, and I know I'm going to pee in your Cheerios, but I won't tell you that it's milk. I'll just tell you I'm peeing in your Cheerios. Here's the thing, man. You look at the population of the East Coast, Mordor, right east of the Mississippi River. You look at the population now compared to what it was in like the 1920s, 1930s. Okay, the white-tailed deer was hunted nearly to extinction then. Look at it now. You might think there's deer everywhere. Yeah, well, that's because right now, like 5% of the U.S. population hunts. Okay, 5%. Also, here's the thing. They generally hunt mature bucks or fully grown deer. What happens when they're hunting, and they generally hunt rifle seasons like 1 or 2 weeks a year, maybe several weeks a year, but weeks. What happens when a big chunk of the population is hunting all year round and they're shooting pregnant does and baby deer, right? The deer don't go that far. Look at the population of people versus deer. They're going to be gone pretty quick. So in that scenario where people are starving to death en masse, hunting's probably the least of your priorities if you live in Mordor. Probably just have food stocked and stay in place because you're probably way more likely to get killed out trying to shoot a deer than you are to get a deer. And if you get a deer, it's probably going to be a happy thing that happens, which is great. But if you're out and about, you're probably going to want the best rifle in Mordor for people behaving badly, which is probably not some specialty AR in some weird caliber for hunting. So I'm sorry to pee in your Cheerios, but that's just, I wouldn't even be worried about it at that point. I would be worried about survival. Your odds of, in that kind of scenario, you probably shouldn't be out deer hunting. So not in Mordor, not east of the Mississippi River. So you do what you want, but if you just want a cool, here's the thing. just don't say that it's for survival. Just if you want a cool AR upper, there's a ton, and this is what I came back with them at. There's a ton of really cool calibers, right? There's 6.5 Grendel. There's 6.8 SPC, great caliber. There's probably a dozen really good esoteric, weird AR calibers. The 30 AR, the 300 Hammer, the 450 Bushmaster, the 50 Beowulf, right? If you just want something cool and weird and different, get it. It doesn't have to be for survival. If you're just looking for a reason to justify a purchase, just because you want it. But I wouldn't pretend it's a good choice for survival. Probably that money and that weight is better spent on your common caliber, your go-to rifle, or your backup rifle. But those are some thoughts there. All right, another question from Patreon. What advice do you have for someone like me that lives in suburbia with no bug-out location? Most property is private, no BLM land, just bug in. I know the situation dictates, of course. I know you're going to say move, but financially, not in the cards. Doesn't mean I shouldn't have a plan. You got me thinking now. Okay, so yeah, guys, I wanted to come back and put in an insert. That's how passionate I am about this. Get out, get out, get out. Move. But I want to say this in love. And I say it because I've done it. I've done it several times. I've done it and it hasn't worked out. I'm still alive. God willing, you still will be too. How do you measure your life, right? If I'd have stayed I'm not from California, but if I'd have stayed there, I had a good career there, I'd probably be making more money than I am now. I'd probably have a bunch more money in the bank if I were smart with it. I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't go back there. Who cares? It's money. You're going to be dead one day. Measure your life by quality of life, not by how much money you have. It might make more money. It also costs way more money. So I can walk out of my house and shoot in my front yard. I can go elk hunting by walking behind my house. I don't have to put my dogs on a leash. Just throw on a backpack and grab a rifle or a shotgun and go for a ruck. I don't have to deal with a bunch of blue-haired liberal women that think they can tell me what to do. It doesn't go too well. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. That's not telling somebody just what they want to hear. The drunk wants to hear, here's a free bottle of booze. No, I don't think you have a drinking problem. That's what they want to hear. That's not what you should tell them if you love them. Tell them, hey man, get your crap together. It might hurt. This is, I think, a common misconception today. This is a little off topic, but is to just be nice. Being nice is not loving your neighbor as yourself. If they need a kick in the butt, you kick them in the butt. If they need motivation, if they need tough love, that's still love. You can just be nice to somebody and let them wallow in sin. Not that this is a sin, but you get what I'm saying. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Well, I've done this. I want you to have what I have. I want you to have a good, abundant life here and now. One day you'll be dead. And every day you spend living somewhere you don't want to live, the day of your life you're not going to get back. So move. I thought I'd put that in there. Can do it. I've done it and it hasn't worked out. Right? I moved to New Hampshire, the live free or die state. I fell into all the hype on that, the Free State Project, and I moved there and I was like, this is horrible. I moved from the West and I was like, this is free compared to New York or Connecticut. It set the bar real low. It's not free compared to the free America, the free West. There's still a bunch of Yankees. Yankee politics. I moved there and it didn't work out. I moved to Alaska thinking I would love that. My wife and I moved there. We spent quite a bit of money going and living in Alaska. Found out it was a lot more liberal than I thought. A lot more people on the government dime, which makes a lot of liberals. And people want to be liberal, that's fine, but I don't want to live near them. So really dirty, high violent crime rate, high drug abuse rate. I thought it was going to be better than it was, but I'm glad I moved there so I wasn't always dreaming about the romantic idea of Alaska versus the reality of Alaska. You can move somewhere and it doesn't work out. It's okay. Probably easier now than it's going to be in the future, unless you just happen to win the lottery or something. So do it. Anyway, I'm going to put this in. But just some extra encouragement, I hope. Man, again, I'm not going to pee in your Cheerios and tell you it's going to taste good. Move. Come out of her, my people. Get out of Mordor. You live east of the Mississippi. Population density there is horrible. If something actually bad does happen, it may not, right? If you're into prepping, if you're not, just be a normie and just hope for the best and just don't prepare at all. But if you're serious about it, what are you spending? Nobody likes to talk about the budgeting of preparedness, right? But sit down, write down your expenses or check on your bank account what you're spending money on, and what can you not spend money on. Do you go out for coffee? Maybe don't go out for coffee. Do you go out to eat? Maybe stop going out to eat. Maybe take that money and put it in savings. Maybe live off ramen noodle and tuna fish for a while. Save that money up so you can move. Here's the thing. It's going to be way easier to move now than it will if some major disaster happens or the economy actually does collapse and there's massive rampant inflation. Not going to be any easier to move then. I know people think that it will be. But if you're not moving now, when all you have to do is look for another job and look for a place to live, right? Live out of your car for a while. I've done it. It happens, right? You can do it. That's a lot better than having to worry about it when the world is ending. So leave. Easy for me to say? Yeah, because I've done it several times. You're not going to die, probably. So, yeah, leave. That's my best advice, man. Where are you going to bug out to? If there is a major disaster, right, and all those people are trying to get out and leave on the freeways, you're probably not leaving. Should you bug in? Well, that depends. Are people throwing Molotov cocktails, from suburban neighborhood to suburban neighborhood? Are they just going cul-de-sac to cul-de-sac and burning everything to the ground and shooting people when they run out? You probably can't bug in that situation, right? I don't care how much ammo you have. They're just going to hide behind the neighbor's house and lob a Molotov cocktail tied to a string on your roof, and you're going to burn to death. And they're going to run out and they're going to shoot you. Like, it just is what it is. You can only bug in for so long. How much food do you have? I guess you could spend a bunch of money and just hope that nobody messes with your apartment or your place in suburbia for several years until most of the people are gone. But it's not a bet I'm willing to take or I would want to take. So now for the small things, have some food stored. The basic stuff for preparedness. Have some clean water stored. Have some food stored. If you're in suburbia, you probably aren't on a well. You probably use city water, which is gross, and you probably shouldn't drink it anyway. But when they stop cleaning it, and you're literally right now, if you're on city water, you're probably drinking recycled sewage. Another good reason to come out for my people. But stop drinking poop. But that's the kind of world you want to live in, and that's up to you. But have some clean water stored. Have some good food stored. There may be a time where you need to bug in, where it makes more sense to bug in than bug out. So have the basic stuff, and then save up to move. That's my best advice for you, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear if I don't think it's true. That's not loving. That's not loving your neighbor as yourself, because I would do what I did, which is save up money and get out. Do you know of any decent tactical 20 gauges? Also, listening to this, can you fire Bernanke slug out of a choke, or is it Foster only? You should be able to fire Bernanke slugs, although it's generally recommended if you shoot slugs, you shoot them through a cylinder bore or an improved cylinder bore. Generally, for best results, improved cylinder is recommended. You probably can shoot a Bernanke slug out of a full choke. You shouldn't, so don't go around doing it. If it was an emergency and somebody's trying to, cut my head off with a machete, some Muslim was trying to go jihad on me, and I just happened to have, for whatever reason, a full choke shotgun and a slug. Would I shoot it through there? Yeah, I would. But in general, no, don't do that. That's bad. Why would you even? I don't know why you'd be in the situation other than that. Full chokes are for specialty shotguns. Generally, improved cylinder is what you want anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it. Do I know of any decent tactical 20 gauges? There's one that I know of, like for a survival 20 gauge, and that's a Mossberg 500. I think it may be a 510, or it's the 500 family 20 gauge with rifle sights. I don't think it takes choke, so it's a halfway decent. You might be thinking, the Mossberg SA-20. Nope, sorry, I had one. I thought it was a good American-made Mossberg. It was made in Turkey. Garbage. You might be thinking of the Winchester SXP 20 gauge. Man, it looks tactical. Yeah, it's also Turk nasty, made in Turkey, made by Muslims that want to kill you, so I can't recommend it. I don't recommend you support jihad or whatever else, so you get a cheap 20 gauge. So, no, the only other one I can think of is a Benelli. Beretta just came out with a 20 gauge. I think it's the A300 and A400 20 gauge. It was one of the few practical things brought out at SHOT Show this year. But it's a gas gun. I love gas guns for shooting. I love gas guns for like bird hunting or whatever. But I don't love gas guns for survival because they crap where they eat. They're like the Ar-15. I prefer an inertia gun or a pump gun for a hardcore survival gun. But if it's just for day-to-day home defense, whatever, and you want a 20 gauge, that Beretta would be a decent one. It's set up for tactical stuff. It's got good sights. It's it's not set up like a bird gun. Not that you can't kill somebody with a bird gun with buckshot. You can, but those are the only two that I know of. There may be one that I'm not aware of. I don't know all the things on the market. All right, another question. Okay. On some semi-automatic pistols, you can see almost clear through where the frame and the slide meet to the other side and see daylight. Is this a deal breaker? Is this a sign of lesser quality? It seems like dust and dirt and debris can creep into the action and into that gap. Okay, I get what he's saying. No, not necessarily. It doesn't really matter that much. Now, you guys know I like a quality steel-on, steel, hammer-fired, full-size fighting handgun. But that's me, right? No, you can see gaps through Glocks, and as much as I don't like Glock, and I think they're horrible ergonomics and horrible triggers and way outdated and stupid guns, sorry, I don't like Glock. But they work. I'm not going to knock on them for that. I'm going to be honest, right? They work. They're some of the most dependable pistols on the planet if you want to set your bar real low, and it just has to work. Glocks work, and they work in pretty nasty environments. A lot of them have a gap where you can see through the upper and the lower parts. So, no, it doesn't really matter that much. You'd have to get a lot of dirt in there because where the dirt's going to go is right underneath the frame and the slide and where the recoil spring. You'd have to get a lot of dirt in there. And if you got that much dirt in there, you could get dirt in other places like behind the hammer on a nice hammer-fired gun. So, no, it's not an issue. If you don't like the way it looks, that's fine, but it's not really going to affect anything that much. I wouldn't really be concerned about it. This one's more of a comment, but I thought it was a good one. If we could have a standard way to mount all these optics instead of different plates. He's talking about mounting optics on handguns because, it's 2026. You probably should have an optic on your handgun. That would be cool. If we had a standard one, I would like it to be the Delta Point Pro pattern. I think it's one of the best, strongest patterns for a direct mount on most full-size fighting handguns. Here's the thing. You'd probably have to have at least two patterns because a lot of people carry these little #MeToo Micro 9s. You're not going to use the same pattern on the Micro 9 because you just have to use a much smaller, worse optic on all guns, which is not a good trade-off. You'd probably need two. You'd need like a very small, like an R.M.R.C. or something footprint on a small gun, and then a real optic and a real optic footprint for a real handgun, like a full-size fighting handgun. So you probably could get it down to two for most guns. I don't know that we're going to see that. We've already seen a whittling down of most Glocks moving away from their horrible mounting pattern, the MOS pattern. That was just kind of like, how can we get this out the market and put an optic on it and say that it actually kind of works? But we've seen this more or less. The two big patterns are the RMR and the DPP, and those work pretty well. So just pick one of those two. It would be nice if we just had one standard for a full size and one standard for a compact. I wouldn't hold my breath on it. One thing you'd like to see is QD mount for handgun red dots. That is a cool thought, although you probably have to make it higher, which means you probably couldn't co-witness. You would have a hard time even co-witnessing with suppressor sights, and I would not take that trade-off. I want co-witness. If my dot is off, I want to be able to see it and slave it to the irons. I wouldn't want a QD optic on my handgun for a fighting handgun if it meant I couldn't see the sights. So I wouldn't take that, although it's a cool idea. And you can do it if you get a handgun that has a rail on top, because there's plenty of QD mounts for a regular rail. And those handguns do exist. So if you wanted to go that route, you could. But to put a QD mounts like for a rail, they're pretty high. So you're probably not co-witnessing, and you probably have to change your shooting technique to do that effectively. But on something like I have a Ruger Mark IV that has a rail on top because it doesn't have a reciprocating slide, and you could put a QD mount on that pretty easy. So they do exist. You can get them, but not probably in the way you're thinking of. All right, guys, I'm already going longer than I would like. I'm going to answer one question before I get to the big closing thing that I get a bunch of comments on throughout that really irks me. But I'm going to answer one question from the YouTube comments, or I'm going to respond to one of the comments from YouTube. Let's see here. I got a bunch. I'm just going to pick one. Also consider reloading for testing the real deal, because while it doesn't make sense for regular ball 9mm for defensive rounds, it's much cheaper. And I wrote, man, I don't recommend reloading defensive rounds for multiple reasons. And that's all I put in the comment because I don't have time to write a thesis on all of these. But I'll get into that here for you. Here's why I don't recommend. There's a bunch of reasons why I don't recommend reloading your defensive handgun rounds. Number one is a purely practical one. You're probably not going to do it as good, especially you if you're not into reloading. But me, just for an example, I have won more handgun shooting competitions than I can remember. And I don't say that to brag. I say that to prove a point. I'm state pistol champion a few times over. I've won more competitions than I honestly can remember getting to those points. And I don't reload ammunition as well or as reliable as good defensive handgun ammunition. I just don't. And I don't have the laboratory to do all the testing that, let's say, CCI or Remington or Winchester has, right? I can't sit there with, if you have thousands of dollars for multiple blocks of ballistics gel and, chronographs and testing in different temperatures and you're going to test all the blocks to make sure you get the correct expansion versus penetration for that hollow point. If you've got all that money and all that infrastructure, that's cool. But you said about saving money. You're not saving money like that. So what are you just going to load up a random hollow point with whatever charge it says and hope for the best that it expands? Like that's not a winning recipe if your life depends on it or somebody else's lives depend on it. So that's a big reason. I don't think I can do it as well as the big companies that have big defense contracts or big law enforcement contracts, right? They put a lot of work into making sure those rounds work and they work appropriately. I can't do that with my infrastructure. You probably can't either, especially if you're not hardcore into reloading. And you're certainly not doing it cost effectively. You said about doing it cheaper. So right there off the bat, it's just not as practical. Another reason is if you shoot somebody, you're likely going to have to go to court. Now, I don't think this should matter, but it is a variable that, you made your specialty rounds because the ones that you could buy at the store weren't good enough. Like you had to get extra deadly rounds. Now, I think that's a stupid argument, but don't put it past a defense attorney to bring that up. So that's not as important to me. Worry about problem number one first, which is stopping the threat. But I think the factory defensive rounds are better for that than your reloads. So there's another one. Also, the really good, expensive defensive rounds, there's a reason they're expensive. They use premium components, which you would have to pay for as well. Something like water sealing your primers or stamping your primers, which, again, infrastructure and money. Stuff like low flash powder, stuff like sealing the front of the bullet so you don't get water in there as well. All these things, right? So, again, there are a lot of reasons why I don't recommend you carry hand loads for your 9mm. And like you said, it doesn't really make financial sense to reload bulk 9mm for the money, but here's where it does make sense. If you're doing something like competition shooting, you're like, okay, I've got this gun set up for Steel Challenge, for my SIG 226, single action only, my Steel Challenge gun, and I know this load is zeroed at this distance, like I zero my handgun at 50 yards. I know that it shoots this load well, it cycles well, it shoots point of aim, point of impact, and I want to run this load for the next several years. And factory loads change all the time. You're like, I can load this load, this 124 grain, I'm just picking one, this isn't even my go-to load, but I can load this 124 grain bullet with 700X powder and this primer and seat it to this depth, and I'm good to go. And it's pretty much going to be that until I want to change it. That's a good reason to reload 9mm. Okay, so I'm going to close with, man, this is a long episode. So I got to one YouTube comment, right? If you want to actually interact more, become a patron, and probably get off YouTube anyway. Anyway, here we go. Here's big. I got a bunch of these, and I get them all the time, and I just don't understand this. People get really upset when I say Judeo-Christian values, and they're like, that's heresy, that's not whatever. Man, guys, Jesus is Jewish. He was Jewish, and he is Jewish. His direct lineage is in the Bible multiple times. He's Jewish. It's not like he was Jewish. He is Jewish. When he comes in Revelation, he is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Yudin, Jewish. He is Jewish. If you're a Christian and you worship Christ, you worship a Jewish man. Now, you can wrestle with that. You can emote all over the comments, but you have to figure that out for yourself. Jesus Christ is Jewish. Now, here's the thing. You have to use some actual critical thinking and stop just being a reactionary and emote all over comments. Jesus often criticized the Jewish leaders of his day, right? That doesn't mean that everything every Jewish person does is right. The Jewish leaders of the time, Jesus railed against. But not every Jew, right? The disciples were Jewish. Paul was Jewish. He was a Pharisee. He wrote most of the New Testament. The disciples wrote a big chunk of the rest of it, written by Jewish people. Your gospel is written by Jews about a Jew. I don't even know what the criticism is. Like, yeah, Judeo-Christian is one thing. Like, Jesus is Jewish. The 10 Commandments, they're still there. They still apply. They were given to Moses, descendant of Abraham. Right? Like, I don't even know how you don't see that. Like, why is this even a thing I have to argue against? And I have to do it all the time because somebody doesn't like one or two Jewish people. Here's the thing, right? You don't get a free pass on something because you're Jewish, right? You know what you call a Jewish child molester? A child molester. You know what you call a Jewish thief? A thief. But just like if a black person robbed me at gunpoint, I wouldn't think that all black people were robbers. Or if your girlfriend cheated on you with a white guy, you wouldn't think that all white guys were like that, right? What are you doing? Like, sin is sin. You don't get a free pass because of whatever nation state you are, whatever heritage you are. But yeah, Judeo-Christian. Jesus was Jewish. He is Jewish. He's the Lion of the tribe of Judah when he comes in Revelation. He's descended, his direct lineage is in the Bible. He's Jewish. All the disciples were Jewish, as far as I'm aware, every single one of them. Paul, who wrote a big chunk of the New Testament, Jewish. He's a Pharisee. Jesus is the Word. He is the Torah made flesh. He is the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I don't know what you're arguing with me for. Go read your Bible. You can wrestle with that however you want, but Jesus is Jewish, period. All right, with that, guys, I think that'll be for the general tactical tip and tactical verses rolled up into one. So anyway, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all that you do, and have a blessed day.